The first Scrum Guide was published in 2010, but that was not the first time the Scrum was introduced. Let's see the origin of Scrum. In 1986, a similar concept of Scrum was introduced in the name The New Development Game by Takashi and Nonaka in an article. And in 1993, the first Scrum team was formed by Jeff Sutherland and few others, adapting the idea of Takashi and Nonaka's paper. In 1995, the Scrum was first presented to the public in the name of the Scrum Development Process by Ken Schwaber. In 2001, Agile Manifesto was created, 2002, Scrum Alliance was formed, and 2010 is when the first Scrum Guide was created by Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland. Since then, the Scrum Guide has gone through several changes, addition, modification, removals. So this video, I'm going to explain on all those revisions since its publication. So as I said, the Scrum Guide was initially published in 2010 by Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland. That's the first guide that explains how to use Scrum to build a product. And after this, there were 5 revisions so far, and the final one that we have now is 2020 version. I've tried categorizing the changes as whether it's an addition to the previous version or a modification or a removal. I think this view would help you better visualize. You can also find this in the description of this video. So after 2010, the first revision happened in the very next year, 2011, and it had a lot of changes from 2010 version. In 2011 Scrum Guide, there were some additions on product backlog grooming, explaining on what is the process, who works on it, and when it should be updated and so on. That's the only addition. Coming to the removal part, there are lots removed in 2011 compared to 2010. So the newer version does not mandate burn down chart to monitor the progress. It only suggests that the remaining work for a sprint should be known on the daily basis by the team. Next, the release planning is not required, although it is good to have. Next, reference to SBI, sprint backlog items, is removed. So in the newer version, it's simply sprint backlog, which is the items selected for the sprint from product backlog. No more sprint backlog items. Next, the first guide had a lot of tips, optional practices, and techniques, which is removed in 2011 version to keep it more simple. And the references of chickens and pig is removed. So if you're not sure on what it is, refer to my video in the description link below. You'll get an idea. It also removed references of undone work. That's about the removals of 2011 version. So now coming to the modified or the revised ones. The 2011 version says that development team do not commit to completing the work planned during the sprint planning meeting. Rather, it says that the development team just creates a forecast of work, but that forecast might change throughout the sprint. So I think this gives some breathing space for the development team. Next, product backlog is ordered instead of prioritized, because it's believed that this would provide flexibility to the product owner to optimize value. And finally, the team performing the work of creating an increment is the development team. Regardless of the work performed by the individual team members, no more roles, they are commonly known as developers. So that's all the changes between 2010 and 2011 versions. The next version was published in 2013, 2 years later. This had very few changes to the previous one. A section on artifact transparency has been added. What are those artifacts? Product backlog, sprint backlog, and increment. So these artifacts helps us to provide transparency, and we all know Scrum purely relies on transparency. Next, sprint planning is added as one event. It basically emphasizes 2 topics: what can be done in the sprint and how that can be done. And it also talks about how Scrum team should come up with the sprint goals as part of the sprint planning. Next, Scrum prescribes its events to create regularity and to minimize the need of any other meeting not defined in the Scrum. All events are time-boxed events, such that every event has a maximum duration. This helps to reduce the waste of time. There is no removal from 2011 to 2013. Coming to the revision part, the product backlog is refined rather than groomed. It's because in general, the word grooming has negative implication like child grooming. So they felt that grooming is not a right word for the Scrum team and replaced with refinement, which sounds much better. The importance of the daily Scrum as a planning event is reinforced. So it says that the development team should not see this event as a status meeting, but understand how it intends to work together as a self-organizing team to accomplish the sprint goals. So the three questions that has been slightly rephrased. Earlier it was what has been accomplished since the last meeting, what will be done before the next meeting, what are the obstacles in the way. I think most of us are familiar with these three questions, but this has been reformulated to emphasize the team over the individuals. So now the questions goes like, what did I do yesterday that helped the development team meet the sprint goals? What will I do today to help the development team meet the sprint goals? Do I see any impediment that prevents me or the development team from meeting the sprint goal? So if you see, the individuals has been removed and replaced with the team. The emphasis is more on the team. The concept of value is also reinforced to use in the sprint review. So during the sprint review, the Scrum team and the stakeholders collaborate about what was done in the sprint. Based on that and any changes to the product backlog during the sprint, attendees collaborate on the next thing that could be done to optimize value. That concludes the change between 2011 and 2013. The next Scrum Guide was released 3 years later in 2016 with just one change, a section on Scrum values. So this version explains about 5 Scrum values: commitment, courage, focus, openness and respect. That helps 3 Scrum pillars: transparency, inspection and adaptation to come to life. That's the only valuable change in this revision. The next version was published in the next year, 2017, with many important changes again. This version has a new section on the topic uses of Scrum that basically talks about how Scrum is being used extensively by various sectors like research, development, product and enhancement, sustain and renew products, etc. It also clarifies that the word develop or development refers to any complex work. So basically it says that the Scrum framework is not only for the software development but is adaptable to any developing complex work. And this version added to the sprint backlog section. A recommendation is added to the sprint backlog section to ensure continuous improvement. There is a good suggestion here. It suggests to include at least one sprint backlog from the list of improvements identified in the previous retro meeting. So I think that gives a lot of importance to the retro meetings. Next, it added a section on Scrum Master service to the product owner, explaining how a Scrum Master can help the product owner and ensure that goal, scope and product domain are understood by everyone on the Scrum team. No removals in this version. And now coming to the revision part. This version provided better clarity on the Scrum Master role. Next, it updated the first paragraph of the daily Scrum section. It basically adds on or emphasizes more on how the development team should see the daily Scrum to inspect progress towards the sprint goal. It added clarity around the time boxes. Here for all events, the time box is defined with the word at most. That's the addition. So that removes a lot of questions around time. It's simply the maximum time and it can complete in any time shorter than that. It added clarity to the increment section. It explains on how an increment is a step towards the product vision or goal. That's all the changes between 2016 and 2017. And now coming to the final version as on today, 2020 version. In this recent guide, there are few additions, modifications and removals as well. Let's see the latest changes. Introduction to product goal. So in 2020 Scrum Guide, it introduces the concept of the product goal to provide focus for the Scrum team towards a larger valuable objective. Each sprint should bring the product closer to the overall product goal. And it's home for sprint goal, definition of done, and product goal. So the previous version also had described the sprint goal and definition of done, but they were not tied to the artifacts. In this version, each of this is a commitment to the artifacts. So for product backlog artifact, it is product goal. For sprint backlog artifact, it is sprint goal. For increment artifact, it is definition of done. These are the additions. Now coming to the removal, even less perspective. It is said that Scrum Guide has started getting a lot more perspectives over years. So this version has reduced it by keeping minimally sufficient framework and removing the softening perspective languages. Now coming to the revision part, one team focused on one product. The goal was to eliminate the concept of a separate team within the team, like us versus them behavior between product owner and the dev team, scrum master and the team, and so on. So there is now just one scrum team focused on the same objective with three different sets of accountabilities: product owners, scrum masters, and developers. Self-managing over self-organizing. Previous Scrum guides referred to the development team as self-organizing, choosing who and how to do the work. With more of the focus on the Scrum team, in 2020 version emphasizes on self-managing Scrum team. So choosing who, how, and what to work on. So now the team has more power to self-manage and decide on what to work. It added what along with who and how. The third topic added to sprint planning. So in addition to the sprint planning topic of what and how, the 2020 guide places emphasis on the third topic, why. This why question is basically explains the goal of the sprint goal. An overall simplification of language for a wider audience. So it has removed any remaining reference to the IT so that it fits wider audience. Overall, it has eliminated redundant and complex statements. The guide has reduced from 19 pages to 13 pages now, keeping it more simple and powerful. So that's all the recent changes of 2020. So overall, you can see how many times the Scrum Guide itself has changed to make it better, a better flexible framework. This shows Scrum framework itself is subject to empiricism. I think this video has helped you to get a high level idea of what are all the revisions that has gone through, and you'll see the full table in the description of the video link. Please subscribe to my channel if you find this insightful.